is Indian country today.
Sk'aliCh'elh, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Tholahungva. A court victory for the United Kituwa Band of Cherokees means they can now establish service on their tribal lands. This brings to an end a long court battle between the United Kituwa and the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma. In 2011, the Bureau of Indian Affairs approved the application to take land into trust for the Kituwa to develop a cultural center. The 76-acre parcel of land is near the Cherokee Nation's headquarters in Tahlequah and within the Cherokee Nation's historical territory. The tribe claimed it had to give consent before land was given to another tribe in its territory. On Monday, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the right of the United Kituwa to have the land put into trust without the consent of the Cherokee Nation. Members of the United Kituwa Band of Cherokee Indians are descendants from the original Cherokee tribe. A plan to mail absentee ballots to Alaskans 65 and older is being called out for being unfair to Alaska Natives. Lieutenant Governor Kevin Meyer announced his plan, saying the absentee ballots could keep seniors safe in this pandemic. But State Representative Matt Clemens says the plan raises voting rights and constitutional concerns. He says this plan will serve more white voters because 33% of Alaskans who are younger than 65 are people of color, but that percentage group drops to 23 in the older than 65 age group. Still, other people say everyone should receive an absentee ballot, especially those living in rural areas with limited access to the internet, and that it would protect every single voter. The city of Fort Bragg, California is considering changing its name. It's named after a Confederate general who had no direct ties to the region. In 1857, Lieutenant Horatio Gibson established a military post in the region. It had a negative impact on the Mendocino Indian Reservation. Gibson chose the name to honor his former commanding officer, Braxton Bragg, a man who had more than 100 slaves. During a city council meeting last night, one Native man urged city leaders to consider how it makes Indigenous people feel.
But I would ask the city council to consider the relationship it has with the tribe it has and with every tribal members it could have to move forward with a name change if there is a name change. I don't agree with the name. I don't like the name myself, but I just want it to be a reminder that this was a place of oppression.
In the past, the city has considered changing its name. Now the mayor will designate 2 council members to create a commission of residents to examine the issue. A rapper in Montana is using music to urge Native youth to take COVID-19 precautions seriously. Artie Mendoza III, known by his rap name Kid Truth, wrote the song C-19 after the Confederate Salish and Kootenai tribes reached out to him.
Taking the risk, set COVID-19, put your mask and your gloves on. COVID-19, roll your shoulders and brush off. COVID-19, put your mask and your gloves on. COVID-19, roll your shoulders and brush off. Ay, wash your hands, wash your dirty hands. Ay,
he said it's an effort to keep elders safe. The Flathead Reservation has not seen a significant number of COVID-19 cases. They've had a total of 9 cases and no deaths. And now for an update on COVID-19 cases in Indian country, let's go to our Washington editor, Jordan Bennett-Begay. Jordan?
Yate Patty, Yate Shikisto Shidineen. We have updates of COVID-19 from 6 tribes across the country, and here are the latest numbers from my database. There are 10,965 positive cases and 443 deaths in the Indian health system. Again, that is a total of 10,965 positive cases and 443 deaths as of June 23rd. On the east coast of North Carolina, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians reported 1 additional case. The tribe now has a total of 59 cases. And in Nebraska, the Winnebago tribe reported 2 cases and 2 additional deaths, bringing the total to 66 positive cases and 3 deaths for the tribe. And the Navajo Nation, that spans across Arizona and parts of New Mexico and Utah, reported 55 new cases. The tribe had 8 weekend lockdowns before the Navajo Nation president, Jonathan Nez, paused the curfew for 2 weekends. And due to rising cases and hospitalizations in Arizona, Nez reinstated the 57-weekend lockdown for residents for this past weekend and this upcoming weekend. And the Hopi tribe, which is surrounded by Navajo, also had its first weekend lockdown this past weekend.
And that also is due to a huge spike in cases from June 1st to June 15th. Jordan Benebigay, thank you.
Yeah.
And we'll be right back.
This is Indian Country Today.
Welcome back. For Native Americans, family ties aren't limited to human beings. For many, the animal world is very much a part of the cultures. And so it is with the Lummi people in Washington. They call orca whales their relatives. And so in 1970, when many of their relatives were captured in the Salish Sea and taken to aquariums across the country, the Lummi mourned the kidnappings. One of those original whales that were captured, only one remains alive today and is at an aquarium in Florida. Two Lummi women are fighting to bring their relative home with the help of an international law firm. Grant Wilson is the executive director and directing attorney at Earth Law Center, the firm that is representing the women. Welcome, Grant.
Thank you.
Raynell Morris is a Lummi elder. She and Ellie Kinley, another elder, sent the notice to the Miami Sea Aquarium on July 27, 2019, letting them know they are being sued. Welcome, Raynell.
Sk'aliCh'elh, good morning.
Well, the whale that has been gone now for 50 years, why now is there an effort to bring that whale home?
What we are doing is we had a ceremony out in our islands where her home is and her family is, and our ancestors told us that it was our sacred obligation to bring her home, to make her whole with her family. We will heal the Salish Sea, heal the salmon, heal Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau, and that in turn will heal our people.
And she comes from a specific pod of whales that have been identified, and that family of whales is still in that area.
Yes, they are. She is part of a larger clan that we've named Sk'aliCh'elh, and there are 3 pods within that clan, J, K, and L pod. She is from the L pod. Her mother is Ocean Sun, L25, is 92 and still alive, sings her song for her daughter. Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau, all the way in Miami, sings her song from her mother, calling out for her to hear her.
And that is the name of the whale, Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau, that was removed many years ago. And you know, when you look at historical footage of that, when the whales were captured and removed from that area, it really even ties into the forced removal of our Native children who were sent off, away to boarding schools. And so that correlation, when you're talking about family and what happened to our human being families, but also now what has happened to our animal family members. How do you see that correlation?
We certainly do, as a mother and as a grandmother. If anybody came and took my child, that loss, that hurt would be there forever, even when they're brought home. It's still traumatic. She was violently captured. There were 4 orcas that died in that capture, and there were 7 that were taken. And from 1970, Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau is the only survivor, which is tribute to her spirit, to her mother's spirit, to everyone that prays for her to come home.
And so you two, you and your friend, decided to create this effort to bring Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau home. Why not have the tribe lead that? Wouldn't that be more of a stronger voice to have the tribe, the Lummi Nation, also a part of this lawsuit?
What happened is when we did ceremony, traditional ceremony in the San Juans where she's from, the ancestors told our respected religious leaders who told us that it was our sacred obligation to bring her home, to reunite her, heal her family, heals our family because she's part of us. So when you're given that guidance from ancestors, you do it, you do the work.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, there you have you're in the process of making a film, a documentary about Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau. And in that trailer for the video, you have somebody from the tribe actually went and took recordings of the pod, the family of Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau, and played that for the whale. And the whale had a very visible reaction to hearing the calling from the L pod.
Yes, see, each clan, in each family member, her mother handed down to Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau her song. So the mother is here in the Salish Sea singing it. Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau is in Miami singing it. Residents around the seaquarium can hear her. She will never forget her song and hopes of being reunited with her family. I believe that's her spirit that's keeping her alive, because this year it's 50 years in captivity. Those of us that have been shelter in place under COVID-19, we're going on 90 days, and we're already having issues and problems mentally with our families, with our friends. Think about 50 years of isolation.
And she truly is in isolation. There are no other whales living with her. The last whale that was in the aquarium with her died, I think, back in like 1980 or so.
Yes, what they did is they put a couple of dolphins to keep her company in her tank, which is the smallest tank in North America. She can't dive like she does. Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau, Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau, they swim up to 150 miles a day. She can't.
Yes.
She can't be herself. She has to perform for her food.
So when you sent the letter last year saying that you intended to sue them if they didn't take action, what happened after you sent the letter to the owners?
Well, they did receive our letter. They acknowledged that, but nothing meaningful and tangible came out of it. So we started looking for a legal partner to follow through with the intent to sue letter. And so that was done in July. So we're coming right up on that. We feel like that's been a fair amount of time to give them an opportunity to do the right thing. There's still opportunity for them to do the right thing, but we do have legal representation. So we're following through with the next step for reunification.
All right. And so that's a perfect segue into Grant. Grant, your law firm specializes in what's called earth law. How is that different from environmental law?
Well, earth law is a natural evolution of environmental law. Basically, it's all about a new DNA of our legal system based on respect for nature. And a lot of what we do is a growing amount partnering with indigenous communities and advancing their own rights, customs, and belief systems through Western law. And that's why we are thrilled here to provide legal representation in the quest to return Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau to her home.
All right. And you're right now you're in that exploratory phase of searching and seeing what can happen in the courts. But one of the ways you're fighting this is bringing up the NAGPRA law, which is the Native American Graves and Repatriation Act. How did you decide on using NAGPRA when it comes to an animal like the whale?
Yeah, well, when we came on to this legal representation, there had already been a large amount of research by leading NAGPRA experts, basically agreeing that there's a very strong case to be made that Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau is qualifies for return under NAGPRA. And just to give a little background, under NAGPRA, it requires the return of some Native American cultural items to the people that they came from. And Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau is sacred to the Lummis and has vast cultural importance to them. And while it's a little bit non-traditional to apply NAGPRA to a Southern resident Orca, it falls within the letter of the law pretty clearly. And again, the NAGPRA experts that we've spoken to across the country think we have a high likelihood of success here.
And it's so interesting because typically NAGPRA has been used to repatriate items from museums, and then on just federal lands here. So looking at this and how you're applying it to, and again, it's not just a whale. For a lot of tribes, the animal world are very much relatives to the native people from whatever region we're talking about. So looking at Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau as that relative that was taken away. There is concern that she has been in this aquarium for 50 years and would not be able to adjust to life back in an open sea. Raynell, do you want to talk about that? What you guys have planned?
Yes, we do have a plan that's being developed and has been, and we keep building our alliance with the experts, that we have a location for a sanctuary for her. We have world-leading experts that have partnered with us, knowing she would need to go through a rehabilitation with her muscles to be able to keep up with her pod, to be able to swim that 150 miles a day, to be able to hunt for food. And so that is already in place. The other part that I look at, when I lived for a period of time in Albuquerque, New Mexico, my family is still here in Lummi. If they called and needed me to come home, but New Mexico government said, you're too old, that's too far of a trip for you. They don't have any right to say that. Your home is your home, your family and your people are everything. Nobody makes that decision but your family.
That's a good way to correlate that, and understanding the law that you're trying to use and to put into place in this case here. And it's not just the Lummi Nation, but even the Tulalip people in the area also consider whales to be their relatives. Can you talk a little bit about that, and perhaps other tribes in your area that have those same beliefs?
Yes, in fact, we're really proud of our sister tribes. We have passed an affiliated tribes and Northwest Indians resolution that's made up of about 75 tribes in support of Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau and the southern resident killer whales, Sk'aliCh'elh. So it's the Squamish, it's Swinomish, it's Tulalips, it's Yakimas, it's tribes that aren't even on the ocean, but they are in partners standing up with us in the value of protecting our relations and our family. And so the resolution shows, regional support to bring her home.
And so, when you're looking at where this whale is, it's like clear across the country. It came from the waters up there. People know it as Puget Sound, but you're talking about the Salish Sea, and transported across the country to Florida in the Key Biscayne area where she's lived for all these years. And have you actually been there to see her, Raynell?
Yes, Tomas, Ellie Kinley, my tribal sister, and I have been able to go and spend time with her. We prayed with her. We carried a message from her mother that they'll be reunited soon. We apologized to her, asked for her forgiveness. That has taken so long. But to keep the fight, keep her spirit, it will be 2020. We're told this, she'll be home.
And even in the middle of all this pandemic, your fight continues.
Stronger than ever, because the spirit and the messages are coming that its time is now.
And there is a grant, there is a precedent for this. Everyone knows, or probably has watched the movie Free Willy. And in that movie, Keiko the whale was actually in an aquarium and was set free. Are you using that? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, that was a success story where basically people around the world, from children to elders, called for the release of Keiko, who had been in captivity for years and in poor conditions. And eventually she was successfully transported back to Iceland.
We're having a few technical issues. But Raynell, can you pick that up, looking at that case of Keiko the whale?
Yes, well, they released Keiko into the wild. There wasn't a sanctuary, there wasn't rehabilitation. And that's what's different with Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau. Because of our alliance and our partnerships with the experts, both in, they've studied Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau. Our partners have gone over to Russia under Putin's request to release the whales in jail, which they did. So we feel very confident that we were doing it in the best way for Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau, the best way for her mother, Ocean Sun, and the most respectful way.
All right. And so the name that you've given the whale, Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau, is different than the name that the people at the aquarium call her by. At first, her name when she arrived was Lolita, and then they gave her the name Tokatai.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that and why that name Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau is so important to you?
Well, those are her show names that Seaquarium gave her. Lolita and Tokatai, those are show names she has to perform. Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau is a Lummi name from the Penn Cove area where she was captured. It's the female version of that area of Penn Cove. So that's Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau. All the southern resident killer whales, the whole clan, is named Sk'aliCh'elh, which is Lummi, also for that area in Penn Cove where the capture happened.
All right. Yeah, I think we have Grant back. Grant,
Yep.
Besides Keiko the whale, what other success stories can you point to that show by bringing an animal out of captivity, they're going to be okay, released back into the wild?
Yeah, well, I think there's a long history of other mammals released in terrestrial ecosystems that do great. Wolves and bears, for example. The unique example of releasing a southern resident orca back into the wild after this long, there's the example of Keiko that I think was a success. The world came together and called for her return to her homelands, and she did so and made it there safely. I think in this case, we have on our side scientists, lawyers, biologists, and experts from all walks of life who are all rallying behind the safe return of Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau to her home. And I think with that combined intelligence and research and science, if there's a good chance to reintroduce her, and I think there is, that will be successful. And I'm hopeful that that's the outcome of this case.
And it's just, again, when you're looking at changing this kind of law, you're asking the people to really understand the rights of nature, the rights of animals, and even that can, some states have rights for water, saying water has a right to its own life, so it can go and flow because it creates riparian areas. And so it creates a community for the animals to come and drink, the plants to grow, et cetera, et cetera. So, looking at the rights of nature, Raynell, Native people have always had this idea and respect for nature. In our last few minutes here, what else can you tell us about that spiritual connection you have to the whales and how they impact your culture as Lummi people?
The story of the Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau in Lummi means the people that live under the waves. And that was told to me numerous times by our late chief, Sk'aliCh'elh. And for us, that's how the relationship is. The Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau regalia is just regalia. When they come back up, they are our relation, they're human. When they go back under the water, they're Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau. So that's that close kinship that we have with them. And as a family member, we honor and respect them. As they live in our Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau, we honor and respect the Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau. We are survivors of the Great Flood. We're the Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau people. So we're of the water. We're salmon people. Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau depend on salmon.
And those ties are very deep. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Raynell Morris, thank you so much.
Sk'aliCh'elh-tenau.
And Grant Wilson with the Earth Law Center. Thank you so much for joining us, Grant.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves. Your life is precious. I'm Patty ICT. Join us again tomorrow.
This is Indian Country Today.